Good morning, everyone. My name is Stella Primo, and I am the Executive Director of the Capital Region Family Business Center. And I'm really excited to be able to share this panel with you and this webinar, this virtual event called You're Not the Boss of Me. And we have an exciting panel with us today, and Kim's going to be introducing the panel. But first, I wanted to let you know that this is being recorded right now. We are going to have it live on the website by Monday, and I will be sending out a link to this recording out Friday or Monday afternoon at the latest. This is as participatory as you'd like it to be. We've made it confidential with using the Q&A button at the bottom. And you have an option of being able to submit questions anonymously. This program is for informational and educational purposes only, that if you have questions that directly relate to your family business, to please consult with your technical advisors. So Kim, I took care of all of that boring stuff. Kim, why don't you go ahead and introduce your panel and we'll get started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stella. Well, welcome everyone. You know, I have to tell you, when the Capital Region Family Business Center Programs Committee met, we brainstormed about this concept for several months. And our initial thought was we would have some guinea pig non-family CEOs and COOs come on the panel and share their war stories. And, you know, it's funny, we did not find many people who were willing to step up and do that. And so this has evolved, and eventually we went out to our members and said, tell us your war stories, either what you have dealt with or what you're currently dealing with a non-family member managing family members. And we'll bring in a panel of experts who have had similar situations, perhaps have similar scars and bruises, and let them be the consultants, if you will, to advise. And so we have genericized some of the situations we received, and we have this awesome panel. You will not believe the wisdom that is on our panel this morning, and I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves, but we'll talk as consultants. Now, I often use the situation or the scenario of the Peanuts cartoon of Lucy saying, well, the doctor's in, and we actually have one doctor on the panel today, which is a hoot. The other two panelists may have played a doctor on TV, but I don't think they're doctors. So we'll have them introduce themselves, and then we have three scenarios that we'll present, and I'm actually going to use PowerPoint slides to outline what the scenario is, just so we make sure everybody gets that. A couple of them we have org charts, just so you can kind of see that, and then I'll take that off, and we'll ask the panelists for their input. But as Stella said, if you have either questions about these scenarios or other questions, you can submit those through the Q&A. Only Stella will see those. They will be anonymous. No one on this panel or anyone in the audience will know who is submitting those questions, and we'll get through as much as possible. So with that, I'm just going to ask the panel to start. And Lois, will you start and introduce yourself? Many of our members know you already from your good work, but please tell us a little bit about how you got here and your experience in either managing or consulting with people who are managing people who don't have the same surname.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So I'm depending on Ken and Saeed to smile at me really big, because it feels weird speaking out into the air. I started out in healthcare, and so I was doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions with healthcare kidney dialysis centers that were combining into hospital systems. And it was, I really liked it. It was fast paced, it was interesting, it combined numbers with people. And so during that process, I got my MBA, and I was very immature. At a board meeting, I complained about how difficult all of this was. And I have to tell you, a man who was about 50, I thought he was old. Now I don't think he was so old, came up to me and he said, honey, this is nothing compared to working in a family business. So he asked me to come over and do their strategic plan, and I got hooked. So I went back to school again because I figured out it was a lot about group dynamics, definitely about family dynamics. How do people interact within a business environment? So I went back to school and I got my PhD in industrial organizational psychology. You have to understand, when I was in the beginning of this, I was so excited about my new pathway, and I called my dad and I said, Dad, I'm going to go back to school and this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm going to get. And there was this huge pause on the phone. And he said, I'm not paying for it. It was like, I didn't ask you to pay for it. And my dad, unfortunately, had dementia and passed a few years ago. But up until the day he died, whenever I would visit with him and he would take me to church, he'd always introduce me as, this is my daughter, Lois, the nurse. No, I just gave up. I was like, no. So I have been in family businesses for over 25 years. I love the complexity. I love business, period. But adding families and groups and how everybody interacts on top of that is just, I always enjoy it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lois. I'm really pleased you could do this today. Saeed, Yosef, would you please introduce yourself? We were lucky to recruit you because you are currently not a member of the Capital Region Family Business Center. Saeed is in Fremont, but could you tell us a bit about how you got here and your experience in managing people who don't have the same last name?
Oh, my pleasure. By training, I'm an engineer. I have about 30 years of experience. I have worked in 5 different countries. I have worked half of my career with very big companies like Exxon Mobil, Bechtel, Johnson Controls. However, for the last 14 years, I'm working exclusively for family-owned businesses, and I'm working with Trico for 3 years. And whether it's a family-owned business or the enterprise, all businesses want to hire honest, very productive employees, irrespective of who they are, whether they are publicly traded company or with ESOPs and so forth. But working in 5 different cultures, 5 different countries, like I lived in Europe for 3 years, I recognize family psyche and mindset to make money differ slightly than the non-family companies. And as we go into the seminar, we're going to talk about it. One more thing here at Trico, our founder and the owner is very well focused on sharing and learning his experiences with the outside world. So he tremendously appreciate the value of this kind of a setup, and the fact that he is a CEO, a board member with different organizations. So we very strongly as a culture here at Trico believe that sharing and passing the knowledge is extremely important for with any business, whether it's family or not. So that's my background. And
Terrific. Thank you so much. And Saeed, as you'll learn later, has a great
I don't think it's just me, Kim. I think you froze on us.
lost the video. I mean, we lost the audio actually.
Ken, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'll jump right in there. Well, I'm the non-wisdom part of the board. We're a company that's owned by 3 family members, or 3 different families, and we call ourselves a family business. The original business was formed actually April 17th, 1931. So we're coming up on 90 years as a business. As Holt of California, we're about 22 years old. We merged two businesses to become one, just defined ourselves as a family business. So we have what we call my business son. He is, of the three families, two families have people working in them. One is on the course to be my successor. And then I have a son who just joined us two months ago, and a daughter who's worked for us about 7 years and is now on maternity leave for a little bit of time. So a mix of family members and a mix of families to be a family business. My seniors just rolled off of our board and as shareholders this last year. So we are just starting a new board with the next generation, which makes me the senior now. And that's a little bit tough to digest in itself, but we're going through that transition as we speak right now. So that's a little bit about us. And then we're also, our businesses, we sell tractors.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna wing it.
Okay. Good idea.
Until Kim comes back on. So just so everyone knows, we have 3 different scenarios and each of us are going to weigh in on that. And the first scenario was mine, so I'll just kind of leap in, and when Kim gets back, then she can ask further questions. So the scenario is that there is a non-family chief operating officer. Her name is Stacy, and she has a family member, Tim, who is reporting to her. Tim has been the director of food safety for 3 years. And the last 2 years, the business failed their annual food safety audit. So they're coming up against a lot of fines and potential shutdown if that doesn't remedy itself. And the other part of this, just so you know, is the CEO is Tim's uncle. So obviously Stacy reports up to the CEO, who's a family member. So she's kind of squished between the two, and Tim is below it. And there we have the PowerPoint. So Tim is a cousin of the CEO. So I think as a consultant, one of the things I find happens a lot is that I'll get this like little snippet of this person did this and it's terrible and we need to fire Tim. And I don't get a lot of background. So the big thing to me is always looking at, getting as much information as possible. So, what does his HR record look like? Is there a job description in there? Kim will be happy to hear this. This is why she's jumping back in. Then I would look at how is there a performance evaluation on an annual basis for Tim? Was there any type of performance improvement plan, or was there even a verbal warning that has been written down? So I want to get all of the background before I sit and talk to Stacy. I have a lot of HR people who will just say, it's just really, he should be treated just like the family. I don't agree. I think that I have to understand that business and that family to know what do they do. Do they put business first? Do they put family first? Do they really try it a business family balance? Because the worst thing I can do is if they are really like family first and I come in and say that guy needs to be fired, we're not going to go anyplace. And I love if a family says we are into a business family balance and the business is tipping the scale a little bit, because that means everybody's focused to making the business right, making things happen, and making sure that the business stays there so that the family can continue. But you don't want to give counter to whatever the family has really decided. Some of the worst things I see with something like this, Stacy and Tim, is that we keep ignoring it year after year. And then the business is really, obviously is running into trouble. I mean, ideally, Stacy would sit with Tim and figure it out. I also would like to know, does Tim even like what he's doing? Is he in the right place? I mean, can we save this situation by moving him to a different part of the company where he'd be better suited? I will never ever forget one where I had a gentleman who he was placed in sales and marketing because when he came out of college, he was a son. It was the only opening there was, and he was abysmal at sales. He was an introvert. He just did not like it. And 3 years later, he had a bad reputation within the family that he was a low performer. Well, on sales, I wouldn't have even said that. He was a non-performer. He just clammed up, ended up back in the office all the time. Everybody else was out traveling. And, we did an assessment on him, sat and talked to him. We moved him over to R&D where he got to bake products, research products, and he was happy. He did really well. He started performing well. So I think we need, this is really, it sounds like a small scenario, but I think there's all kinds of levels there of, is Tim in the right place? What does the family believe needs to happen? What has the history been? Has he been given education? So it's a lot more complex than it appears at the beginning. Ken, would you like to weigh in? Did I miss some parts?
No, I don't know if you missed any parts. I might be a little different approach. I think I would probably, having not been a consultant, I don't know how I would do it that way, but I would probably have Stacy go get the facts and dive in herself, and then go sit down with the CEO and say, here's what I've discovered, here's what I found. By what we've seen, it would appear that Tim should be moved out of the position. Doesn't mean he needs to be fired, but he needs to be moved on to something else. 2 years and you're not getting it right. You're anticipating that's been pretty spelled out. So I think she has to go to the CEO and explain that this is going to happen for the business to survive. But to your point, he may be just better suited someplace else in the company, and that's I guess the advantage you have when you're family. You're not just tossed. You get a chance to show yourself someplace else. So that was the only other little take I had on it, was just probably more direct action and get him out of there, not give him a second chance after 2 years in that particular job. Those are my thoughts.
Right. Thank
I
you.
think that's really helpful to hear. I'm curious to know if the CEO said, no, you have to protect him, then what might you suggest the response be? Saeed?
Well, my personal thing, I'd be looking for another job, actually, if I were the non-family member, thinking I'm not going to survive in this environment.
My take on this is this role appears to be mission critical because company appears to be at the verge of shutting down or by the county or whoever. As Lois said, that we need to really dig and see what happened during the last 2 years, especially after the first failure or the first audit that has failed. Who took the ownership? I mean, quite often there is a tendency to take an easy route, or folks like COO type folks or VP who are the non-family members, they kind of chose to be tactful and diplomatic, but I think in matters of importance, they should show courage and be direct at the onset. So I really need to evaluate the DNA of the COO first. As to, I mean, if I am the owner, I'm going to see, gee, She has the HR, she has my nephew or my son and whatnot. Let's see what she has done over a period. Okay, first time you fail. But second time around, if you are failing, somebody needs to take the ownership for that. So my first approach would be to check as to what COO, the non-family member, did over the last 1 year. And after that, as Lois said, it is imperative that we do competency analysis and see whether Tim is in his sweet spot or not. Sometimes there is a competency mismatch, and for whatever reason, we put people where they are not very well suited. So I think we need to kind of look into this. And if the CEO says that I want to keep this guy for whatever reason or a family imperative, I would say, okay, he can stay home and I send you his check at home. So he don't show up. So there is a way out for the COO, not to fire, save her job and let him stay at home. Supposedly work on Zoom from home, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So I think we need to really, we need, before firing somebody, we need to look inwards and see what these so-called external professionals have done vis-a-vis the development of a family member, and were they being very honest and transparent at the onset with the owner of the company. So honesty is the best policy. So that's my take on that scenario.
I'm curious, regardless of whether this is a publicly or privately held company, how would you handle the optics or the PR, if you will, both inside and outside the customers or the company with customers? Because the word will get out. This is a big fail. So how do you handle that as the CEO? Anybody want to weigh in on that or had that experience?
So for all practical purposes, internally, this has what we call a huge morale implication. And that can be very corrosive if he were to stay in a position where he's not suited, as Louis said. So that's one thing. From the external perspective, the ownership or COO need to get out and let people know that they are going to make some, surgical move, surgical change. This is no different than Tylenol. Well, 2-3 decades back, or I don't know, 40 years ago, there was some poison and Tylenol was at the verge of collapsing, or Chrysler. But there are sufficient examples in the world of business where companies are revived from the brink. So this is revivable. I think the best thing is that people have to show and tell the truth to people or the external customers that we have found these weaknesses in the supply chain, and that's what we are doing about it. So I think getting the bad news out in a very transparent fashion is the key to manage the outside forces, and for the sake of internal morale and to keep the culture intact, this guy definitely needs to move into some other role which is well suited. And both the parties need some coaching. CEO need coaching as to be more vocal in a timely fashion, and Tim needs to be told that, hey, we're gonna find something else. Because if we do the interview, so sometimes when we hire, my HR director and I do something called the interview. We never do the interview, because the interview is simply reading the resume, which anybody can write. So if the DNA of that person, Tim, is sincere and he wants to make something by being there, then irrespective of the fact whether he's a son or a nephew, one can find a suitable place for that person. That's my take. So we need to go to do the deeper analysis and the psyche of that person. And perhaps now I'm gonna say Dr. Lois Land, we're gonna make a comment about the deeper psyche of a person. She's more competent in that regard.
All right, thank you. Any other comments about this? Stella, have we heard any audience, any other questions that we should address in this before Tim throws the company over the edge?
That's funny. I don't have any questions on deck.
All right.
So we can go on to scenario number 2.
Okay, well, I think I am almost back up again. My apologies. I have no idea what happened there. But let's look at the next scenario here. And I'll pull this up on my screen, maybe. All right. So you, Darlene, are the non-family CEO and have held this position for 5 years. Sharon, a non-family employee 4 levels down from you, comes to report that a family member, Greg, consistently exhibits poor behavior. He is late to work, sloppy with work product, and works slowly. Good Lord. Sharon is a peer and a team member of Greg's. So Greg is the youngest son of the owner. You have heard of Greg's challenging behavior, but haven't had direct dealings with him or his manager. And let me just show you an org chart here so you can see, here's you, Darlene, at the top here, non-family CEO, and many layers down here. We have Sharon, who's come to you, as well as Greg, her team member and family member. So everybody got that. So let's go back to our panel. And Saida, I'll ask you to weigh in on this. So if you were the consultant to Darlene, how would you recommend she handle this?
I think we have 2 equally challenging problems, not just one. So, Greg is half the issue. The other issue that I see is that Sharon feels that she won't be, her feedback won't be entertained by the director and the manager. So she felt helpless, and hence she went up in the chain of command. So I think these two things are equally important vis-a-vis the culture and how the workflow shall work. So in my view, Darlene need to really deeply recognize the issue. And she also needs to hold her direct reports, whether it's the COO, directors, or the managers of the staff. She needs to hold them accountable. When she sees that Sharon is going to her directly and bypassing the chain of command, she would know immediately that she don't feel comfortable, or she feels that she won't have an audience. So I think Darlene as a CEO, in parallel, not just talk about taking care of Greg, but she also need to investigate as to why Sharon feels that way. So that's one. And by doing the interview and somewhat digging deeper, she would find out as to what is the issue and how to solve it. So that's a step number 1. And she needs to ask her direct reports, whether it's a COO or directors, do we have a PIP, the personal improvement plan, in place for all the issues? One is, he being tardy, sloppy, meaning that he is not focused. Slow is kind of, I don't think it's an issue being slow, because it's highly, relative. But I think being sloppy, it has to do with quality, and late to work is a serious issue, because that means that you don't respect your job duties and so forth. So I think she needs to begin by first finding the facts. That's my take on this scenario.
By the way, I'm curious, what does this tell you about the culture of the company? What would you guess that it's like? Ken? Lois?
Well, it sounds fairly informal. I guess my take on this would be that, and so a little different than Saeed, in that I have a situation where we have a lot of employees who worked along. I mean, when I first started here, there were people who've been here 10 years, 20 years, 20 years longer than I had. And they're very comfortable coming into me. And this could be in the same situation, that they would go around the organizational chart because they're comfortable and want to what's going on. And I never want to eliminate that feeling that they can come in and talk about it. However, having said that, then the role of the CEO is not to go, be like a bull and go knock down a bunch of doors. You have to be discreet and go really verify the facts. Because oftentimes people really feel like they're doing something right for the company, and maybe maybe the person's not as bad. So I would have them go in and be a little more very discreet in asking the managers, I need specifics what's going on here. I've gotten someone, I don't think who it was that came to see me. We need to talk about it and find out what they said. Might find a little, and that kind of would lend to still probably a lax feeling. It's not, hard nosed, knock and get kind of an environment. It's an environment where people are feeling a little open, which is that would be my take.
Yeah, quite often the family business setup is not hierarchical. It's not matrix. It's more, flat organization. And yes, it is extremely important that the employees feel that the owner or the CEO is accessible. However, at the same time, people in between the COO and the staff need to own certain things. And why she feels the need to go up in the chain of command. Is there any blockage or but one thing is there, Sharon has faith in the company. Sharon is fearless. Sharon will going to do what needs to be done. So when I am writing a check at the end of the Christmas reward or bonus, I'm going to make sure that I add 10% for her being bold. So that part is there. So Sharon is the person whom we can trust. But then we need to investigate what guys are doing in between CEO and so.
Lois, I'm curious. I'm sure you've had something like this in your storied career in family business consulting. Would you advise something different to Darlene?
I think I'm not sure with the Darlene. I would like to jump back into the culture question, because I think it's a blend of what Ken and Saeed have said. Is I'm I understand that with a family business that it's good to have like the open door policy where people feel free to come and talk and do things. But what I have seen is the whole range of it, where people do not feel good at all about going, which you don't want that in, but then people feel so free that they'll just walk into a CEO's office and start telling their perspective, and they've never even given their manager a chance to do that. And I think someplace in between there, we want to land where people are encouraged to really talk to their manager. And Ken said a really good thing, that he would not believe it at that point. He would reassure the person, but then he would go back to the manager and talk to them and find out what was going on. Because I really love, other than like sexual harassment or embezzlement or something that's really big, that employees are working through their chain of command instead of hopping over 2 or 3 layers, because it just creates a challenge where those managers feel like they're not being supported.
Yeah, I would think that probably a little different scenario like this also happens, and that is that 4 layers down, the family member goes to the CEO and says, this non-family member is not performing, and
Right.
My paycheck or my inheritance is based on that as well. But I'm curious for any of you. So how do you decrease the probability that this would repeat itself in the future? And I'm not talking about certainly Greg being a poor performer, if he is, but by the way, Saeed, I'm really happy to say you said working slowly is not a problem, because that means I'm okay. But how do you decrease the probability that people are going 4 layers over you, 3 layers over you to go to the CEO in the future? We've talked about it. I want an open door, but I don't want people lining up at the door all the time and ignoring. What do you say? What do you put in place? What do you train?
Yeah, so training is a function of what we do, and what we do is as follows, quite often, which is we set up one-on-ones. One-on-ones based on the role, could be weekly or monthly. And when we do one-on-one, We discuss all the aspects of business. We even discuss when you want to take time off, what's going on with the family, blah, blah, blah. But we discuss very relevant situations on routine, as a routine. So once that kind of one-on-one become formal, part and parcel of the DNA of the company, then these things do not, fester, because her desire to go up. I mean, it's not she just woke up one day and said, "Oops, this guy Greg is not suitable." She must have been feeling something. There must have been the lack of engagement by directors, because directors are thinking, "Gee, why would I, uh, you know, take the bad news to the owner?" I mean, sometimes there is a need for self-preservation. What can I say? But I think through proper formal routine one-on-ones, you can eliminate that possibility and things come out early, and then you will be able to tackle early. In business, like in life, you don't let things fester over a period of time. So the goal for CEO, COO, and the director is to get the bad news out early.
So you're suggesting that these one-on-ones are certainly with those three layers below the CEO and those supervisors and managers having one-on-ones with their employees.
Absolutely. When we sit down here where I work, is that the HR director, the owner, the CEO, and everybody, we talk about what are our issues in one-on-ones separately and in the setting of the executive team. And we know exactly who is going through, for example, somebody has some issue with the health or the COVID, or somebody needs to work from home because of the kid or the daycare. I mean, we know these kind of minute situations. Plus, we know if a person is selling $5 million job or a $10 million job, or he got stuck on a $1 million job. So what happens with one-on-one? You have a very holistic picture, a wide range of issues, personal, business related, and then we in real time figured out as to how to support these individuals. So it's our role, like what we are doing today as consultants, is to give input in a timely fashion. So one-on-ones is one of the tools that we can deploy in such a situation.
Okay.
I would
Lois or
add,
Ken?
yeah, the other thing that I think you need to do in a situation like this, and this is how I handled it, was I talked to my daughter entered the business. She came in and was working in one of our yards. It was all guys out in the mud. I mean, it's not a lot of women who come into that job. But I did go to the VP of that division, his direct report, and the manager that was going to be at the team, and all of them expect you to go to the same level of accountability that you would anybody else at. That's not working. You need to go up the chain, just like you would anybody else. I need to know about it. You need to be comfortable that it's okay to deal with her if she's not living up to standards that you guys need to live up to. Don't think that she's brand new and her holding a fire hose to wash out the trash may be a little different than some guy who just started the job. But that's they needed to know that they were okay to have the authority to take on the issue and bring it back up to me. And it took a follow up to that, because I don't know that they believed me to begin with. And so I had to follow up a little bit with that to say, how are we doing? And I think she did okay in the job and fine with where she was going with it. And they were comfortable that they had the ability and the responsibility to treat her like somebody else. So that's the other advice I'd give them, is you really do have to tell people it's okay to, bring up the ladder if the person's not performing, and give them the permission to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure in this scenario if this is more telling about the supervisors and managers or more telling about Greg. Lois, your thought on what this reveals if you're the CEO and somebody's approaching you and skipping over 3 or 4 levels?
Yeah, I think it says more about the managers. Have they not been supported in the past? Like what Ken's point was really, really good is I think sitting in front of a lot of managers and directors, they say, oh yeah, the families say that this is really true and that they want to hear. But then when we tell them, you know, it feels like I'm in the penalty box. And some of it is really overblown. They have not even approached the family member. I often feel really sorry for family members who are leading because they're the information is sometimes filtered unnecessarily. So I think that this definitely says more about the managers. And so it could even be, you know, Saeed's idea of the one-on-ones, I think is really good. I think the other thing is really good, heavy, consistent training on how to have difficult conversations, how to lead, so that people, you know, I teach it all the time. So it's weird. Every time I do it, I learn something myself. And, you know, and I'll go in places and they say, oh yeah, we've trained our managers. They know how to deal with people and they know how to deal up. And you'll look and they haven't had anything for 5 years. So, you know, it really is, you know, having those trainings has obviously been more difficult with Zoom. But, you know, having that time where managers hear from each other and hear from the family that, yes, we do expect you to talk to us. We do expect to have these conversations. And then they see that those conversations happen and nobody falls to the wayside, nobody's in the penalty box, nobody has gotten hurt. Then the trust bucket is what I call it of the family increases a lot, and managers start to understand that, yeah, we're all in partnership together. We're all marching down a path to make the business better. It isn't about family versus us. And
Exactly.
there are places, I mean, Ken's is very healthy. So, you know, he has that view. Saeed has really done a great job at Dryco and has made it a healthy environment that way. But there are some, I think I have to acknowledge, because we've got a lot of people watching us, that there are some where the family has unfortunately divided themselves against employees in the way that they have retained multiple non-working or poor performing employee family members when they shouldn't. So, you know, we're talking two gentlemen who are really running good ships, and then there's some real life out there that you know, it doesn't happen.
I have a very unconventional, rather creative solution.
Oh,
One day I know that youngest son could be my boss. Hold on. Let me. Chances are the youngest son, and he's coming late, being tardy. So company immediately buy him a new Tesla car. So he show up on time. And one day when he is my boss, he will going to remember that. How's that sound?
good luck with that.
No, that's my strategy. See, I have to see things over the long haul, not just what's happening today with my friend Sharon and Greg. One day, this kid could be my supervisor. So if I buy him a car now, 7-8 years, my life would be much more easier.
Okay, Saeed, that was worth 5 cents.
Oh my God, it's such a brilliant solution. All right.
By the way, I'm curious, would any of you handle this differently if Greg was not a family member? So Sharon's just reporting on some other civilian in the company who's not contributing?
I think the ownership has an obligation. The founder, the ownership has an obligation to let everybody know that that's not about my family. It's about an employee. And between family businesses and non-family businesses, there is a very good category called family businesses who are doing business like non-family businesses in a very enterprise setting. And Dryco, even before my time, is one of those companies.
Yes.
Where the ownership demands that people should, contribute. So it's not the son, the nephew, or the family or non-family. It's an employee. Once that idea is, saturated with the day-to-day thinking of people, these kind of things will not going to surface. So it's a high-level statement by the owner, by the founder, by the CEO, telling everybody, all of us are company's employees. We all work for XYZ Inc. And you will be judged based on your performance.
Okay, Syed, see, Kim has got us all loosened up and we haven't even had a good drink at lunch yet.
Oh, geez.
So that sounds
Cheers,
really
cheers.
good. And I love Syed, but there's also the reality of it's harder with family. I'm just going to say that, you know, Syed can say that and then everybody goes off and does their stuff. And we will often give more grace to family than we will to others, because I know I'm going to be eating your pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving and you might just put strychnine in it. And I'm going to have to do things with you. And it is more challenging. I totally agree with him. I love Ken's example of his daughter, because he had to make all of the other people comfortable. If it was a non-family member, Kim, he wouldn't have had to do that. He would have, you know, it's just different. They would have felt more comfortable, you know, helping her get to her performance level than if she was a non-family. I, you know, for non-family entering, I always tell them, you can't hit expectations, you can't meet expectations, you need to exceed expectations. That's just the way it is, because you need to prove and show that you're there on your own merits. You're not there because you've got the right last name. But anyway.
Thank you. I like that. You know, we have a family-owned business client. If I named their name, you would all recognize them immediately. And the founder, G1, was very clear to the non-family CEO he brought in that regardless of somebody's last name, the Gen 2 and the Gen 3s were absolutely required to excel in performance in order to be promoted and to be considered. They may get a check as part of the dividends from the company, but they were not going to just automatically be elevated because of their last name. And now G3 is stepping up in this organization, and man, those kids have worked. And I sometimes feel like the CEO has been harder on them than he has been on civilians, although it's a pretty tough culture anyway. I wish I could share it with you because it's such an amazing group. But, you know, that's part of the values of the company. The founder has since passed, but he was very clear. Those kids and grandkids better step up, or they are not going to have a position in this company. They'll be somewhere else. Stella, do we have any questions about this scenario that we should follow up on before we go to number 3?
I don't see any questions specific about this scenario, but the Q&A box is open. I did have 2 other questions, and the first one is not specific to this scenario, but how do family members in operational leadership as well as ownership deal with other family members in ownership that have different perspectives of the business and family balance that was mentioned, like family at any cost, or how do you educate, inform, and reach a healthy balance between business and family? Does anybody want to weigh in on that?
This is that Thanksgiving dinner payback.
Probably.
If you're not in line.
I think what they're also asking is how, if family members have different ideas of business first, family first, or family first, business first, I always look at who has the power. Because sometimes, like, I have a gentleman that was absolutely business first, to the point that he would give his kids about 5 years to succeed, and then if they didn't, they were out. And out of 3 siblings, he has 1 in and 2 out. I make a lot of money on the side with their family because it has not gone over well, did not go over well with mom, did not obviously go over well with the spouses. I think it could have been done in a more gentle way, but he was just flat out business. And then, you know, then I have some that have literally close to have brought themselves way to the brink because it was only family and we ignored a lot of family issues. I would say have a family, your family council, your family meetings where you talk about the balance between business and family and how if you don't pay attention to the business, there won't be a business to help support the family, and then write it down so that the next generations, you can review it, you can talk about it, it can become part of your culture. I don't see that happen very often, and there is often a tug of war about what that balance should be like in a family. I think it's an ongoing conversation.
It is true, family perception in the eyes of non-family members will always be there. This is only natural, but how to bridge the gap is the key. As a strategy, the best thing is to show through joint dialogue what are the business imperatives. Both the parties will going to align to the mission statement, to the business imperative. If the son is coming late, well, it is mission critical to have a meeting at 6:45 or 6:30, right? Then you remove that argument, because the overarching thing becomes what is business imperative. You have certain views as the owner, the founder, or the son, and the non-family CEO is very well trained. He or she is thinking, gee, what these guys are thinking. Fine. These kind of things will always be there. As a strategy, the trick is to bridge the gap and align on a unified goal. And the unified goals are called business imperatives. And from time to time, you develop and fine tune and calibrate your 3-year, 4-year, 5-year business plan. And everybody, just like a US Constitution, there you go. Dems believe something, Republicans believe something, but there is a binding document called US Constitution. So people will continue to be like that. This is a human condition, but it is imperative based on the founder and the so-called hired gun who is supposed to be an expert to fuse their thought process and come up with what we call what is good for XYZ Inc. And then people have to dial in when they are in the building with it. They can go out, do whatever they want to do. But while they are talking and working on company time, and they have to be aligned with the business plan. That's how we do it.
I'd add, and this isn't a paid advertisement for Lois or for Kim, but this is my experience of, I pretty much think I can handle all this. And go right in and from the moment we put these 3 families together, discovered I need to spend more time on shareholder than I ever thought I'd have to. It just became apparent that it wasn't equally shared as to how we're doing, what we're doing, and where we're going. And so I've always had the opinion that I can handle this. And there have been a couple of situations where I went out and brought somebody else in to help this situation. And that has made a huge difference in that business family dynamic and trying to get those in effect. And so one of the things that I say, and most recently was we started doing some really serious transition planning, have brought some people in to help us. And the feedback I got, at first it was kind of like, well, this is no different than if I just did it myself. But then I got feedback from the rest of the family, how comfortable they were to bring up issues that they brought up to me. I thought would not be a problem for me to hear and let's just deal with it, thinking that I'm transparent and open and I'm not as good as I think I am. So I know whether that's an outside, someone who works for the outside, like lead, or whether it's an outside consultant, I'm not sure the best avenue. But I have found that really does make a difference. It allows the rest of the group to maybe be more open and surface up issues that otherwise is, and then you can deal with it. You still have to be transparent and open and let that come up and not beat everybody up, but they do open the door a little bit. So that's worked for us.
It also gives everyone a common enemy. So when you bring Lois in, then everybody is ticked off with Lois. All right, let's
like that.
move to scenario number 3, our third and last one, and I'll share my screen. As I said, these get a little more involved as we go along. So I have created this. So, okay, so it just kind of animates here. So you, Diane, are in generation 2 of the family business, one of 4 cousins working together. The first gen has decided to hire a few non-family executives to help with business growth and mentor Gen 2. The family CEO, John, who is your dad, Diane's dad, wants to stay the course with a vision of continuing a focus of expanding the main business line. 6 months ago, the family decided that a business development position was needed to strengthen the company. So multiple family members from Gen 1 and 2, including John, were involved in the hiring of Sonia. Sonia, the new non-family business development executive, has been working with you, Diane, who is John's eldest child, with market research to show John and the board that it is imperative for the business to consider diverse lines of business and acquisitions in order to ensure long-term sustainability. There were many contentious meetings over 3 months, ending in Sonia's termination. You, Diane, are angry with G1 and your dad in particular for bringing in a professional and then refusing to see where the industry is headed. You feel you learned a lot from Sonia and that Sonia should have had a long career with the company. And just an org chart so we can see where the players are. So there's board, here's John, Sonia's father as the CEO, or excuse me, Diane's father as the CEO. Here's Sonia, the new hire, non-family member, and then here's Diane down here reporting to Sonia. So with that, so Ken, why don't we ask you to kick this off and just, first of all, how do you think a family can best prepare for bringing in and supporting other non-family executives like this scenario?
Well, it's a little odd in this scenario. It's the CEO somehow got overridden, it sounds like, and they brought somebody in without him buying into it. So I guess in my thinking, the contentious meetings need to happen before you hire the person. So it's on the table as to what we're trying to do. It didn't sound like there was any set of expectations laid out, any set of really what we're trying to accomplish here. It sounded like, I guess, the board wanted somebody different and the CEO didn't, and then they had a mess, pretty much. So that needs to happen all in the front. I mean, there has to be some agreement as to why we're doing this, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, it could be simply we need to determine what would be these things, how much do we want to spend on new products, what's the ROI on those, very clear business expectations out of this, and then you have they bring that to the table, then we have something to talk about. Bring that to the table, then this person on their way. So none of that sounded like it happened in the beginning at all. It sounded like it was just very, let's throw something at the wall and Anya will be it. That's kind of my first thought on how to prepare. The other part about this, I think Diane needs to take the long view on this. She's apparently a couple levels down. Got to get rid of the emotion and get the facts and go into her dad and say, I need to understand your logic and why you're doing this, and tell me why you think this isn't a good idea, and not go in and argue. Her job is to learn, and she obviously has some reasons why, and learn those. And she'll have her opportunity to make those same mistakes later on down the line, and she should just learn from this experience in a non-emotional manner. He may be completely right. He doesn't know what his thinking really is, right? He needs to go spend some time with him in the non-emotional aspect. Tell me why you're thinking this will not do. So my first thought.
Okay. Lois, how could this situation have been handled better, do you think? Obviously, we've got 2020 vision here.
Yeah, I love what Ken said. They were not on the same page moving into it. And it was part of why that scenario was laid out like that, is I think that there are often hires, especially at the non-family upper level, that there's not real clarity about what that person is going to do. And then that person gets caught in not being able to be successful. I also liked it because I think it's normal for the younger generation to feel like the older generation is just not moving themselves. You know, they don't know enough, they don't know social media, they're not on TikTok, they're not on Instagram, they're not making things happen. If we were running it, we could do it. And so Ken's idea of Diane and her father spending more time so that she understands what it is. And what happened, it sounds to me like she got kind of isolated with Sonia. I also think it's Sonia's job to get really in line with the CEO to make sure that he's getting what he needs, so that she can also portray that down to Diane.
Yeah, that's interesting because, well, maybe that's in non-family companies as well, but Sonia's got to sell her value or her ideas up. I don't know if she did that or not, but if she spent her time aligning with somebody down in the organization and not
That's
up,
immature on her part.
yeah.
Yeah, but I made it like that on purpose because I think she did do that. And the dad was already on the edge because it really wasn't what he wanted. It sounds like it was forced on him. He hadn't gotten to that space. And trying to force him with a non-family person in the middle is disaster.
Yeah.
But
So I need another perspective on this.
So first and foremost, we need to find out when we say there was some contentious, the word contentious is pretty powerful, contentious meetings. Was it because of Sonia's style, her attitude, or she is developing a new business strategy contrary or parallel to what the CEO wants? Because contentious could be either way. So before firing, I mean, in this day and age in the state of California, you need to figure that thing out very quickly, that contention is stemming from her disagreement towards the strategy, towards the business goals alignment, as opposed to her attitude and style. So that's important from the legal perspective. And point number two, you are absolutely right. I think Kim mentioned that she failed to sell or to promote the idea up, and that's important, because having friends with Diane is one thing, having a coffee or a sandwich, and they two are in sync with their psyche. But for all practical business perspective, she has an obligation to continue. I mean, to keep the CEO John in the loop as to what value she is injecting into. So there are two things. Yes, firing is the option, but we need to know why. And then point number two, was Sonia at fault by not sharing ahead of time, or she was working in isolation, and hence she gave the impression that she is not in board, and hence the word contention and conflict while they are meeting. So that's my take on this.
Yeah, just to clarify, Lois said I made this situation. So Lois genericized this situation from a real life, obviously real life situation that was presented. So she put that into that. We assume that the decision to term her was based primarily from the CEO, from John. It wasn't something that the board would get involved with, but John made that call and she reported to him. So he may have been in a really good mood the day they made the decision to hire, or he might be, the beginning of dementia and has no recollection, and then, the decision to hire, and then one day he comes in and says, this is just going south quickly, and I'll just put a kibosh on it in my role. Who knows what that might be done, or why it might be done. And then there is just this whiplash for the non-family executive who comes in of saying, oh my God, I thought I was on board, I thought I wasn't, and your points about working up in the organization and bonding with the people who are making decisions is whether it's family or not is a really important part to a long career in the same organization. I'm curious about doctors. How do you repair John and Diane's relationship? This is part of that situation we just talked about, you know, is it business driven? Is it family driven, which is the priority in this? And so in this case, John said, I'm making the business decision. How do you repair that?
Well, I'll jump in. I'm not sure John knows he's got a, you know, a situation, depending on how much Diane has said to him. So I think it's on Diane to go make a step. Say, I didn't appreciate what you've shown you, but I need to know why. John could just be being a clueless dad. I know the feeling. So I mean, I that's one of the things she has to step up is to express her concerns or her disappointment or whatever that is to him, so he knows he's dealing with it. Now he has to stand up enough to understand she's got a different view and be able to speak rationally and not in a contentious manner described. So that would be my first on this.
Lois, you ever had this situation come up? How much money have you made on these?
I was gonna say, Ken, my most probably some of my best. This is not Saeed's nickel. This is Lois's dime advice. So we're moving up here. Is that generally speaking, what I find with something like this is that the daughter talks to the wife. And then, so one of your best techniques is to ask your wife, have you heard anything from Diane lately?
Hey, that's the way my family ran, and we didn't have a business.
So I'm always looking at the dynamics underneath to find out where the relationships are. There's this is way back from like the 1960s, I think. There's called relationship vectors, where we used to, when we would do some reports, we would have the business map, then we would have the family map, and this is just who's born to whom, who's divorced, who's this, but then we would create a relationship vector, and I have reborn it again because it's fascinating, and I would not suggest doing this in your family, especially not at holidays, but it is really about if you your entire family, they're in a room and you gave them 5 minutes to place themselves, where would they place themselves in the room? No conversations whatsoever. And do not do this without a professional. It could blow up. But I do it just by using graphics of here's this person. I've got Saeed, and then I've got Darren and Skylar and Hunter, and I would put the people where I saw them having the closest relationships close to each other. And then I do dark lines when it's a very good, strong relationship. I do dotted lines when it is a weaker relationship. I do lines that are totally cut and have a big gap between them when there's been a break in relationship. And it just starts to help visualize where the family is, who do you talk to, when do you talk to them. And the reality is when I when I first went in and worked with families, and this was even when I was, quote, well educated, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to talk to the CEO and then I'm going to talk to this person. And then all of a sudden I found I have to talk to the aunts and the uncles and the spouses, because the spouses will only get pillow talk. So they say, oh, he got a jet and now he's using the jet and nobody else in the family is using that jet. And, they don't know that, hey, they bought an aviation line when it was down and now they're letting people use it. It's not because I love you better than I love you. So I start looking at where the relationships are so that I know how to best approach both the family and the non-family, because I help the non-family understand what the family dynamics are without getting into the details. so that they know who to approach and when to approach and how to approach.
Hey,
Interesting. Saeed, have you ever had to help people kiss and make up?
I would counsel the dad as follows, because I'm going to start like this, tactfully. That you have wisdom. You have to follow your pride. Don't be an old school dad. Go to your daughter directly, and let her know that she is the future of the family business and a legacy. And he may have made a mistake. He wants to understand her point of view, because the new generation, whether it's Gen 1, Gen 2, I mean, Gen 1, Gen 2 in a different setting based on when they're born, and millennials, they are very verbose. They like to talk. They like a 360 feedback. Where I am from, traditionalist or old school, if I may call myself, we don't like to talk about these things. And men especially are very, very stingy in communication. We don't like to admit anything. But this is an important matter. That's, beyond the business. This is the tie, the divine tie between the father and the daughter. So I'm going to tell the father to go and swallow the pride and reach out to her and explain and seek her point of view. I think that will go a long way. And plus, it is his duty, because he claims to have wisdom and made the company and whatnot. So he needs to stoop to that level. That's my take on that.
Saeed, how many daughters do you have?
2 daughters, and I'm
All right.
very scared of them.
It's
I love them. I love them at the same time. I'm just telling.
And
Yes.
would you advise any differently if this was a son?
No, because my 2 daughters taught me well. Unfortunately, I was telling Darren and Jody, our HR director, they all went to UC Berkeley, and I am in trouble because the way they talk is completely lack of alignment. So that's my big challenge at home. But no, they talk about being gender neutral. Dad, don't do this. We are all equal. Coming from the Indian background, the male, the females, but I know enough. I have sufficient experience in life that I treat them equally. But here the role is dad seeing the future. Dad time on earth is unlimited. He needs to stoop because he is the custodian of wisdom. He needs to stoop and tell her that how important she is, and going to induce her to open her heart and talk. I think that would going to be very of a significant value. That's my take.
All right. Ken, did you have another comment?
Oh, I just, in all 3 of these scenarios, Lois made a really good point, which is spouses. And we really didn't address that. But in a family business, that is always underestimated, the impact of that and how you do things and what the kid will do and go to mom or to dad. That's huge. And you have to recognize that and learn to manage that and understand that. No one wants to go home and get battered by the spouse who's upset because you didn't pay attention, didn't do something. I think all 3 of these scenarios, we probably missed that part where these are kind of ugly situations. You probably need to be managing your spouse.
All right.
Very legitimate.
Good point. All
It's
right.
also why when you have a family council or a family meeting, you have spouses, and I will dare to tread on the holy ground of even ex-spouses. If that ex-spouse is connected with children, that to me, that person still needs to be there. And I have seen it just really in very really heart-wrenching ways where an ex-spouse that didn't understand why dividend checks went down, came to a family council meeting, heard the non-family CEO come and say, here's where we're headed, here's the equipment we're having to buy, here's what we're having to capitalize. And the ex-spouse coming to me during a break and saying, well, now I get it, it's no big deal. And the CEO was just so happy. He came to me, he's like, you got my ex to do this. I was like, you know what, guy, this is the 3rd ex I've had to deal with. We need to talk about something else. No more women.
All right.
Oh, sorry. We're
Thank
ending
you,
on a
Lois.
happy note. Maybe there's some
No more
questions.
women. Stella, are there some questions in the Q&A? We can have this esteemed panel.
Yes, we have a couple of questions. So the first one, I'm gonna lay out a scenario, and there's not a specific question, but it sounds to me like they're asking for some advice around equal voice, quote unquote. So here's the situation. We have a non-family CEO. Two members work in the company on the senior leadership team, and they both report to the non-family CEO. The same two family members are also on the board of the all-member board, which comprises both G1 and G2. So it's an all-family board that the CEO reports to. Senior leadership and other members do not feel they have equal voice because of the relationship with staffing and also the connection to the family board. Is there any advice you could probably give to the CEO or senior leadership team when they're reporting to the board about the equal voice? And I know the urge to all answer at once is, but if you could just really like answer one at a time, that would.
Clarify for me, the CEO is family?
Non-family.
Non-family, okay.
family.
And everybody
And-
else is family.
Everybody else's family, including two of the people that report to him. So there's a little imbalance of two people reporting to him that he also reports to as board members.
So there's two executive team members who are on the executive team that are family and on the board.
Yes.
Got it. Go for it, Ken.
They hire an outside consultant to come in and solve the problem for you. I'm not sure I understand that. I mean, I'm still not 100% sure what exactly I'm trying to address. The feelings of the CEO?
Yeah, it seems like it's the feeling of the CEO not feeling that they have an equal voice or concerned about how they share information up when they also have two people working for them.
I mean, my default on all these kinds of things is you have to just be transparent about it, and you have to sit down and talk about it and say, here's what I'm feeling, and here's why I'm doing this, and find out whether it's a fit or not. I mean, sometimes it's not, but to dance around them or to not address it, just you can't sweep it under the rug. So my experience has been, and you try to do it as gracefully as possible and as articulate as possible, but you have to address the situation and tell them where you're feeling limited or what you can't do, and get some feedback in that regard. And you may be misinterpreting the situation, you may be right on, and maybe it's not a fit for you. That's what the case. Address it, you'll never know.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. I do have another question.
Wait, I think Saeed was going to talk though about this one.
Okay.
Very quickly, in 15 seconds, when we talk about reporting, we are going back into this mindset of hierarchy. And then when you develop that mindset in a business, you weaken the collaborative mindset. So it's not who you report to, it is the quality of ideas that shall prevail. And that's important because I have been in that role where you are reporting to the family board because one day the kids will going to run the business, or they would going to have a board where they're going to hire somebody else. So it's important to keep them in the loop. But it is not about the tier or ranking and who is superior and this kind of a thing. In these kind of settings, the quality of idea shall prevail, which is in alignment with the mission of business. And whoever come up with the idea will have a voice, will have a vote. So once we define that I'm not hiding behind my title, I'm not trying to be hierarchical, but in this company, in this business, do you want to run like Google or do you want to run like ExxonMobil? This is very important concept in this day and age as newer generation have all the technology and the information flow is faster. You need the old school folks like me to grasp, digest, and process things faster. And it's the processing of idea and we cannot hide behind the title. So that's my take. And family business is unique because in the end, the entire family is sitting on the board, because when the first generation will move on or pass away, whatever, the business will be passed on to the second generation. What they do with it, that's their prerogative. But at the same time, they are the owner, the custodian of something that their parents created. So people like us need to remain cognizant of that fact and choose the quality of idea concept as opposed to the title centric cycle. That's my take on that.
Thank
All
you.
right,
That was
Stella?
so beautifully stated, Saeed. Thank you very much for that.
I read all the good books that Kim told me to read prior to seminar. Thank you, Kim. God bless you.
Well, what I would like is for Kim to keep giving you books that you can read back to me. So, okay, here's another scenario, and this one it starts out with, what about scenarios where the family members perform properly but face adversity due to not having to take the same path as non-family members? How do you abate animosity from higher level employees who feel shorted due to being passed up simply because of their surname?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I had that situation. I don't know whether I handled it well or not, but on a kind of on a broader basis, we've talked about that we do want to perpetuate our business and have it be an ongoing entity as a family business. So, we don't make a big deal that the family, without the family, is nothing, but we do talk about the family when we do new employee orientation. Just in general, that's our goal. So there's an understanding that a family member has to go up the ladder probably faster than something else. So we have that kind of continuity. But there have been a couple instances where somebody, really got upset. A family member got the job that they wanted. And it really took me having to go sit down with them and explain that we're not going to impact the compensation. They're going to get compensated like they would have got the job, that this person needs this responsibility for them to move on to the next responsibility, which is going to be to run the business. And it's going to have no impact on your career. We recognize very clearly how good you are and want you to stay here and will value you. But you have to understand, as being part of the team, the family is going to have to run the business. That's our model. And some took that well. There was still one person that they really struggled hearing that, and it was pride. We again tried to just be a little more transparent about it. Yeah, they have a faster career path than other people trying to do. That's the nature of it.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. All right, I think we have time for one more question. And Stella, I know there was one that came in early before
Yes.
the webinar. Do you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
How does a staff member who is also an owner earn the trust of company executives who are non-family members?
Well, I tell the son of the owner to buy me Starbucks every now and then, and I'm fine with that. So there you go. That's the short answer. I think a trust is earned. That's a very good thing. If the family member is saying those words, this guy or gal has a talent, because if he or she is worried about her image and want to strive and write her own ticket, and the very fact she asked that question as to how I please or earn the trust of somebody who is not outside the family is, it's already there. That's my take on this.
And I think, to quote some other famous doctor, they just need to work their tail off, like in any company.
Yeah. Work will define you. Our work, our habits, and how we exhaust ourselves, irrespective of the family name and who we are. Our work will going to define us in the eyes of people. That's what's important. Very well.
True. All right. Well, Stella, I will turn it back over to you.
Yeah. So thank you, all of you, for taking on these scenarios. And I know that in family business, thanks. It's not easy. I'm like, there's so many complexities that have to do with family businesses in order for you to successfully transition the company, the family business, to the next generation. And so it's programs like these, and it's panelists like you that really help us continue to have these meaningful conversations. And so I thank you immensely for being here. I thank you for your candor, and I look forward to hopefully soon being able to see all of our members in person. And so thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again. And if you're not a member and you've been able to participate and you're interested in membership, I'm going to be sending out an email with our contact information, and you can ask me questions about how to join Family Business Center. And we'd like to welcome you to the Family Business family. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
And I
Bye.
think that's it. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.